The Mensheviks were a faction of the Russian socialist movement that emerged in 1904 after a dispute in the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party between Vladimir Lenin and Julius Martov, leading to the party splitting into two factions, one being the Mensheviks and the other being the Bolsheviks. The dispute originated at the Second Congress of the RSDLP, ostensibly over minor issues of party organization. Martov's supporters, who were in the minority in a crucial vote on the question of party membership, came to be called Mensheviks, derived from the Russian word, whereas Lenin's adherents were known as Bolsheviks. Neither side held a consistent majority over the course of the Congress. The split proved to be long-standing and had to do both with pragmatic issues based in history, such as the failed revolution of 1905, and theoretical issues of class leadership, class alliances, and interpretations of historical materialism. While both factions believed that a bourgeois democratic revolution was necessary, the Mensheviks generally tended to be more moderate and were more positive towards the liberal opposition and the dominant peasant-based socialist revolutionary party. Split. At the Second Congress of the RSDLP in August 1903, Lenin and Martov disagreed, first about which persons should be in the editorial committee of the party newspaper Iskra, and then about the definition of a party member in the future party statute. Lenin's formulation required the party member to be a member of one of the party's organizations, whereas Martov's only stated that he should work under the guidance of a party organization. Although the difference in definitions was small, with Lenin's being slightly more exclusive, it was indicative of what became an essential difference between the philosophies of the two emerging factions. Lenin argued for a small party of professional revolutionaries with a large fringe of non-party sympathizers and supporters, whereas Martov believed it was better to have a large party of activists with broad representation. Martov's proposal was accepted by the majority of the delegates. However, after 7 delegates stormed out of the Congress, 5 of them representatives of the Jewish Bund who left in protest about their own federalist proposal being defeated, Lenin's supporters won a slight majority, which was reflected in the composition of the Central Committee and the other Central Party organs elected at the Congress. That was also the reason behind the naming of the factions. Despite the outcome of the Congress, the following year saw the Mensheviks gathering considerable support among regular Social Democrats and effectively building up a parallel party organization. 1903 to 1917. In 1906, at the 4th Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, a unification was formally achieved. In contrast to the Second Congress, the Mensheviks were in the majority from start to finish, yet Martov's definition of a party member, which had prevailed at the First Congress, was replaced by Lenin's. On the other hand, numerous disagreements about alliances and strategy emerged. The two factions kept the separate structures and continued to operate separately. As before, both factions believed that Russia was not developed enough to make socialism possible and that therefore the revolution which they planned, aiming to overthrow the Tsarist regime, would be a bourgeois democratic revolution. Both believed that the working class had to contribute to this revolution. However, after 1905, the Mensheviks were more inclined to work with the liberal bourgeois democratic parties such as the Constitutional Democrats, because these would be the natural leaders of a bourgeois revolution. In contrast, the Bolsheviks believed that the Constitutional Democrats were not capable of sufficiently radical struggle, and tended to advocate alliances with peasant representatives and other radical socialist parties such as the Socialist Revolutionaries. In the event of a revolution, this was meant to lead to a dictatorship of the proletariat and the peasantry, which would carry the bourgeois revolution to the end. The Mensheviks came to argue for predominantly legal methods and trade union work, while the Bolsheviks favored armed violence. Some Mensheviks left the party after the defeat of 1905 and joined legal opposition organizations. After a while, Lenin's patience wore out with the compromising, and in 1908 he called these Mensheviks liquidationists. In 1912, the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party had its final split, with the Bolsheviks constituting the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party and the Mensheviks the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party. The Menshevik faction split further in 1914 at the beginning of World War I. Most Mensheviks opposed the war, but a vocal minority supported it in terms of national defense. 1917 revolutions. After the overthrow of the Romanov dynasty by the February Revolution in 1917, the Menshevik leadership led by Irakli Sateli demanded that the government pursue a fair peace without annexations, but in the meantime supported the war effort under the slogan of defense of the revolution. Along with the other major Russian Socialist Party, the Socialist Revolutionaries, the Mensheviks led the emerging network of Soviets, notably the Petrograd Soviet in the capital, throughout most of 1917. With the monarchy gone, many Social Democrats viewed previous tactical differences between the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks as a thing of the past, and a number of local party organizations were merged. When Bolshevik leaders Lev Kamenev, Joseph Stalin and Matvey Muranov returned to Petrograd from Siberian exile in early March 1917 and assumed the leadership of the Bolshevik Party, they began exploring the idea of a complete reunification of Bolsheviks and Mensheviks at the national level, which Menshevik leaders were willing to consider. However, on April 3, 1917, Lenin and his deputy Grigory Zinoviev returned to Russia from exile in Switzerland and reasserted control of the Bolshevik Party by late April 1917, taking it in a more radical, anti-war direction. They called for an immediate revolution and transfer of all power to the Soviets, which made any reunification impossible. In March to April 1917, the Menshevik leadership conditionally supported the newly formed liberal Russian Provisional Government. After the collapse of the first provisional government on May 2, 1917 over the issue of annexations, Sateli convinced the Mensheviks to strengthen the government for the sake of saving the revolution and enter a socialist-liberal coalition with Socialist Revolutionaries and Liberal Constitutional Democrats, which they did on May 4, 1917, with Martov's return from European exile in early May. The left wing of the party challenged the party's majority led by Sateli at the first post-revolutionary party conference on May 9, but the right wing prevailed 44-11. From then on, the Mensheviks had at least one representative in the provisional government until it was overthrown by the Bolsheviks during the October Revolution of 1917, with Mensheviks and Bolsheviks diverging, Mensheviks and non-factional Social Democrats returning from exile in Europe and United States in spring-summer of 1917 were forced to take sides. Some rejoined the Mensheviks. Others, like Alexander Kollontai, joined the Bolsheviks. A significant number, including Leon Trotsky and Adolf Joff, joined the non-factional Petrograd-based anti-war group called Mizrayantsy, which merged with the Bolsheviks in August 1917. A small but influential group of Social Democrats associated with Maxim Gorky's newspaper Novaya Zhizn refused to join either party. After the 1917 revolution, this split in the party crippled the Mensheviks' popularity, and they received 3.2% of the vote during the Russian Constituent Assembly election in November 1917 compared to the Bolsheviks' 25% and the Socialist Revolutionaries' 57%. The Mensheviks got just 3.3% of the national vote, but in the Transcaucasus they got 30.2%. 41.7% of the support came from the Transcaucasus. In Georgia, about 75% voted for them. The right wing of the Menshevik party supported actions against the Bolsheviks, while the left wing, the majority of the Mensheviks at that point, supported the left in the ensuing Russian Civil War. However, Martov's leftist Menshevik faction refused to break with the right wing of the party, resulting in the press being sometimes banned and only intermittently available. The Mensheviks opposed war communism, and in 1919 suggested an alternative program. During World War I, some anti-war Mensheviks had formed a group called Menshevik Internationalists. They were active around the newspaper Novaya Zhizn and took part in the Mizrayantsy formation. After July 1917 events in Russia, they broke with the Menshevik majority that supported continued war with Germany. The Mensheviks Internationalists became the hub of the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party. Starting in 1920, right-wing Mensheviks Internationalists emigrated, some of them pursuing anti-Bolshevik activities. The Democratic Republic of Georgia was a stronghold of the Mensheviks. In parliamentary elections held on February 14, 1919, they won 81.5% of the votes, and the Menshevik leader Nozhdanya became prime minister. Prominent members of Georgian Menshevik Party were No Ramashvili, Evgeny Gegechgory, Akakiy Shkenkely, Nikolai Shkidze and Alexandra Lomtatidze. After the occupation of the GDR by the Bolsheviks in 1921, many Georgian Mensheviks led by Zhordania fled to Louisville-sur-Orge, France, where they set up the government of the Democratic Republic of Georgia in exile. In 1930, Ramashvili was assassinated by a Soviet spy in Paris. Menshevism was finally made illegal after the Kronstadt uprising of 1921. A number of prominent Mensheviks emigrated thereafter. Martov went to Germany, where he established the paper Socialist Messenger and, in 1923, died. The Messenger moved with the Menshevik Center from Berlin to Paris in 1933 and then in 1939 to New York City, where it was published until 1965.